Yo, what's up guys? My name's Wheysted, and today we're going to be diving into my newest release track, Jabs in the Pit. So, Jabs in the Pit is my most recent release. It is a dubstep style track. This is actually the second full iteration that me and STVNK made, who is the collaborator on this. It also features BLUPILL. And one thing that anyone that listens to my music knows, I love fakeouts. I love melodic-ish elements in my heavy drops. I just don't like to just have quarter notes. I like to usually have something else on top. That's what created, honestly, like this cool new phrase. And that was the fake out. That comes out of nowhere, just in here. And we let the fill happen. The fun thing is, resampled it, right? And we did a lot of crazy stuff to this. What we did is we took this sample. So we're creating a lot of movement, right? Stuff you wouldn't usually do in dubstep, which is like have this filter go around, create crazy peaks, flanger, which I really don't use that much. And then if you just turn it up, you kind of get this cool little movement part versus if this wasn't on. Just adds more character, right? And then you chop that up. You find your little bits of gold, which if we go here, I think we probably have it like cut up like this. And that's how we created this little part on top, with a lot of transient shaping. But it's fun because you add that to the already excision style rail breaking. It just kind of gives that extra layer, right? So, and I think that's what a lot of people forget to do in a very saturated field of like what I'm going to call subsidious step, which is that quarter note dubstep, is you have your chugs, right? You have all your chugs, you have your movement, you have your sustains, and you have your sub that goes with it. Like that alone is a cool drop, right? It'll get plays, it'll get played out. But just adding something that you like, and personally for me that's just adding fun little melodies on top, really brings it to life. So then it sounds like this all together. And it doesn't have to be up front. So there's three main parts on a drop, right? As far as basses go, or I guess four. Let's do four and work from the ground up. You have your sub, right? You have to have a boom and sub, and it almost has a lot of bounce to it because it's like very transient. And I use a quarter note, but ironically, it's just a sample, which I know go to jail immediately. It's a nice fat sub from Bad Clat, and then yeah, I hate to tell you that's really it. Just super loud in the mix, and I use Span to look at my stuff, but. As you can see, the dark blue is my mono signal. The red orange is the stereo signal. So my sub is just all mono. The noise up top, more stereo heavy, because it really doesn't matter. It's more for phones, like hearing it in your phone is why we have like the stereo heavy white noise up there. But yeah, you don't have to overcomplicate it. If you find a good sub sample that fits, as you can see, there is literally nothing more simple than literally just having utility. This is probably the most simple thing of the project so far. So we also have another part here, which is going to be the synth. I'm going to call it like the melodic part. So we have to know what is the perks. And for this, I think the first drop's actually really simple. It's just a few different chugs. Little OTT. Fresh air just adds like noise. Once again, a lot of dubstep is noise. More of the high kind of tonal part. You have an ivory on the two, on the like the half beat of the half, just for tone. Another one, and all you'll see is OTT, EQ, this little disperser. This is just a lot of OTT, EQ. I like whenever I'm actually mixing into my track, assuming I'm not doing like the sound design in that lane, it's usually like some sort of compression, EQ shaping, and then G clip. You'll see this goes into Chugs group, which is getting a lot done over time. Once again, more fresh air. I generally don't use that a ton throughout, but fresh air just sounds good on a good quarter note dubstep, like if you're doing the kind of that atonal sound. And you'll see I'm even taking out noise here if I solo it. Like it's very harsh. I'm taking that out, but then I'm kind of adding it back in, and it's really it. Just a low cut and soft clip. Another thing you'll notice that I do a lot with Chugs, which I think a lot of people forget to do, and if you're doing, this is a huge thing, if you're doing like subsidious step or the quarter note dubstep, you need to have pitch. You just can't have the same note just play over and over and over and over and over, because it's boring, and we perceive it as that. You can, for example, have a note, say if you have the same shot twice or even more than that, like if you move stuff, which if you're on Ableton, Command Option Shift or Control Alt Shift, while you have your sample, you can slide it around. Super good. So you can take, it sounds different because you're starting it, even like you're fading. You can do different stuff with one sample, which is why you'll see most of my project and or my personal samples in audio, because you can shape them so much. You can do so much rather than like MIDI where it's going to start and do this cycle. But going back to the shifter, is I shift the pitch a lot. Like you watch here, it just adds a little more like organic feel, not like perfect repetition, you know, subliminal, but it works out. You'll notice as well, I am widening my basses a little bit. And this is my theory that I think a lot of people should take away, is that if you're having chugs or quarter note basses playing with sustains, your chugs should feel wider, because it's gonna be like bum, wham, bum, wham. You want to kind of feel that. Everyone's headbanging in that motion. Everyone's headbangs to quarter notes, right? You want it to sound wider. For your sustains, you want it to have that power, but you want to be more in the middle. And this is generally how it goes. For example, we can use span. You can see that that light blue is almost touching the blue, which means my side signals, it's almost too wide. It's almost phasing. And you'll see vice versa. I'm pulling in my sustains a little bit with my width. And you can see they have more room between these two, the light blue and the blue, which means they're more mono. So even though these basses are fighting for the same space, which is around this area, 200 to let's say 18K, one is more mono and one is subjectively more stereo, which allows you to hear both of them at the same time. I think a lot of people overcomplicate mixing or like post-processing, and it doesn't have to be that complex, especially when you're adding in another layer, which is my synth, right? My main melodic. Now this is my widest, and this can go both ways. This is not a always rule. Usually the high leads, especially like future bass, you have like those cool saw, very like excision, woolly trifecta leads. Those are actually the most mono. I wanted the chugs to be the widest. I wanted this to be the widest so it could be also like the quietest comparatively. You'll see that this is sitting further back in the mix if I play everything. And if something's more mono, it has to be louder. Now, doesn't mean it doesn't work, for example. It's just a subjective mixing choice. And I think a lot of people take to heart, like, I saw this on this video. This is what this person did. It's the only way it works, you know? And that's not true. Like, I could even make this thing mono. We're going to turn it up, for example. Now, that's extreme, because that's only the mono signal, right? But even if I turn it down a little bit, like, it still has its place in the mix. I just chose. Now, the one caveat of mixing is, obviously, if you go too wide, it sounds great in headphones. Like, it sounds phenomenal. But as soon as you collapse it to mono, you're like, where did my sound go? For example, we can use utility again to showcase this, because this is probably one of the biggest things people don't understand when they're first starting producing, which is like stereo field and mono in their mix, which is fine. But if I make this kind of, let's just make this kind of wide. So we can tell it's too wide, because if we see red, that means it's out of phase, which sounds good right now. But as soon as I collapse this to mono, it sounds like it's two different volumes, right? And when it collapses that way, it doesn't sound good in the mix. Because once again, if we play the whole thing together now while it's being pushed super wide, versus if it's not a mono, sounds up front. But not all systems are in stereo. It's unfortunate, and you have to be able to mix down your stuff in mono to keep that going. That's how I approach mixing layers, is just not only finding the spectrum in the hertz range they belong to, but also how mono is it going to be versus how wide. If I already have something here, it's just like a parked car. All right, you can't park here. We can park here, we can park here, we can park here, but you can't park a car on top of each other. So that's the easiest way for me to kind of explain that. So the drums to this track are fairly simple, and to all my tracks are fairly simple, because if you're spending a lot of time on a kick, unless you're like wanting to synthesize your own kick and really spend the time to get it right, like, it's not needed. And I believe that because if you're spending so much time post-processing, that's less time you're actually putting in the effort to create the track. Drums aren't that creative in dubstep. It can be a little bit, but it's usually 1 in 3, and you got some rides. Like, you're not recreating the wheel here. So I choose a drum that sounds good, and that was Bad Clat. I guess Bad Clat got some love. I must have got this pack sometime around that, but like, I have my own kicks that I like and I'll reference, but like, depends on the mood, right? And sometimes I don't want to do that. And a lot of people think like, I make a track, I need to have all my own sounds. And a lot of people that are first starting out, like they try to get into sound design and they're like, okay, this is I made this sound. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it. It ain't it, respectfully. And it doesn't have to be it. I make sounds a day that I'm like, this is cool. It'll never work. So do it with your drums too. Just get good drums, get splice, get packs, ask a homie. Like drums are so easy nowadays. But anyways, the kick. It is distorted to all fuck. It's just kind of like fucking hitting the wall. The only thing you'll catch me doing is I soft clip everything in my track. Every group that is going onward, there's probably at least 70 G clips throughout this track because everything's getting clipped before it's going to my master. Specifically true to drop drums because drums have very good chance of clipping. So kick, drop snare, another clap. Love his claps, by the way. So cymbals, super easy. I do this pretty much the same way every single track for dubstep. I like my crashes either every 4 bars or 8 bars. Find a crash you like. I think I use this one quite a bit. Sounds good. You'll see that I usually have a ride on the 2 and the 4. On the 2, 4, and this one's on the 1 and 3, so every quarter note something's happening. It sounds like this. One trick that I use though, if you're not side chaining your cymbals, which I don't, put a line delay on. And what the line delay does is makes them come in a little bit later. So you're pretty much just delaying it as if you were like adding delay over here, a millisecond. But I do it for my whole group, and I can show that real quick by just resampling this. So you can see like everything's slightly moved over a little bit. So this is pretty much where my kick and say my snare or clap transient comes in. So instead of side chaining it, I'm still having it there. It's just not the same exact moment whenever my snare hits. So that's really it. Cut out your low end. You don't need it at all in this. You don't even need low mids, even if you think like, oh, this crash has good low mids. You don't need it. You have basses in there. You have sub bass. You have literally everything else. You're literally only hearing your cymbals for this right here, your 10K. Yeah, so it's cool. What you'll do is you'll put the link mode down here on, and then you can turn up your time, so however long you want. But like, it definitely helps like the groove. Like if I turn this up, make this more obnoxious. Verse. So it definitely helps. No, like if I did this right here, it's the same exact thing. It just prevents me from having to use sidebars for something I'm not looking intuitively normally, even though I have it on. Like when I'm going through my track, and it's just something I can just do out the gate really quick. And I have it pre-saved in my template. So mix and master a drop. Like gain staging it is another term for it. Mixing, gain staging. You're gonna hear this back and forth. For people that don't know, gain staging, like you can add effects and naturally it brings down the volume, and you want to bring it back to that volume before the effects. Mixing, you're just balancing your mix, right? You just need everything to kind of work. I mix in terms of hot, and what hot mixing is leaving no headroom, aka I mix to 0 and then I make it louder. So my mix is already pretty loud. A lot of like classic producers or mixing engineers cringe at that, and it kills them inside because they're like, you need this much headroom before you master. And I say fuck that noise, because we are literally in 2025, and the biggest reason why we had headroom back in the day is because analog gear couldn't withstand that hot of a signal, and now we can. Now we can literally blow out our masters and nothing happens and nothing gets damaged, right? So how do I mix and master? Well, as you can see, without the reference track, because that doesn't even matter, these two groups are the biggest thing. Everything else is kind of just random stuff in the project. But drums and pre-master, they're hot at 0 going into my master, right? So if I tab over and I solo my drums, no matter what, they're at 0. And just because it's at 0 doesn't mean you can't distort something. I also found someone to not understand this. This is from my students. Let me just elaborate real quick. I can distort my kick a ton, and it's still going to show 0. So it's like the classic, like, well, you got to use your ears on finding how much distortion you want in it. And as you get your mix super loud in dubstep to the -2 LUFS, -3 LUFS range, stuff's naturally going to distort. So you have to like mix in that mindset. The biggest part here is this is per track, my imager. So once I've kind of mixed everything, this is just kind of like the final thing I'm doing on my bands here. So how wide is something going to be, or how mono? You can see my sub completely mono. If I introduce my mids, as we go up, you're going to see it get wider and widest once we add in the final band, right? Once again, we're widening our spectrum. That's per track. There's not really like a, this is how you do it. This one as well, Dynamics, is literally just a multi-band compressor. These are just different bands. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling this down to, you'll see, compress it, but then I'm gain staging it back up, and that's the right. So you'll see input numbers right here and output numbers right here. And my goal is to roughly get them the same. And you'll see on these bars right here in my bands that they're that downward color is the compression happening on each. So you see it looks like my third band is probably the hottest because it's getting compressed the most. which makes sense because most of your sounds are going to have something in that area, and our ears are most sensitive to like the 3.7K area that Virtual Riot's talked about. It's like the baby scream, so it's good that this stuff is not probably the loudest in my mix. After that, I'm literally just gaining it back up 10 to where it was. I'm just soft clipping. So now from pre-master going into my master and drums going into my master, I have a 0 signal and a 0 signal. And for the most part, they should cohesively work because when my kick and snare are hitting, it's going to be during my side chain, which means my pre-master is quiet during that time. So I have 2 zeros hitting at different moments. They're not really overlapping a lot besides the cymbals, but that's gonna kind of the only overlap really. Now, mastering's super simple. Mixing is the hard part. That's you making sure everything's right. That is the most tedious, hard part about being a producer. If you're doing a ton of EQ work and you're doing a lot of stuff in your master, go back to your mix. You got to just make it super simple. My master rack is build gain. So what I can do is I can turn down the volume of something during my build, and because the build is one of your loudest elements because you have so much stuff in it going very rapid, so I can turn it down. Cool thing about this is I have a compressor afterwards, so you're not going to see like your waveform get quieter. It's just going to actually become more dynamic but still be at 0. Really good trick if you're doing that to like try to make your build not as loud as your drop is to do that, put a compressor after it. I can also pull in the stereo a little bit. Once again, makes your drop seem bigger if your build pulls in slowly becoming mono. I have my mono check. This allows me to check my track in mono. I can tag that real quick, hitting U. That's how I have it assigned. And then here's the secret sauce, is 2 Ableton stock multi-band compressors that are in parallel with the time turned up and multi-band. And I turn it up around 25%, and that just helps kind of compress my mix a little bit more because it's not like dubstep's most dynamic music out there. So whatever I can do to kind of make it sound cleaner, louder. And then I have my final utility to gain up to the loudness I want. That is being clipped by, once again, G-clip, doing nothing but clipping. And I have a span and a LUFS meter, which helps me. And that's really it. There's one other thing that I will mention that is on my master. It doesn't do a lot. It's Oxford Inflator. I got this because I did a Wooly tutorial back in the day, and he had it on his chain. So yes, I spent $75 to just get something that's pretty much a saturator, just so I could be as close as I could to remaking that sound. It's like a dynamic tube saturator compressor all in one. It does 1%. It's not changing the game, but I paid money for it, so I'm gonna find a place to use it. So I have that there on Inflate, and I mixed it in at 50%, and literally that's really it. This allows me to consistently get clean mixes, loud LUFs. I'm usually around -2 to -1.5 LUFs for my dubstep. It's a very easy process for me to replicate, and that's the biggest thing if you want to get consistent and good at producing, is to be able to have a process you can replicate. Because if you're in your master messing with EQs, messing with these saturators, doing a lot of stuff, you're like, all right, this sounds great for this track. But that's only if you mix it, I'm not gonna say terribly, but like mix it weirdly this way for this one. So when you do it a different way, now you apply this master rack and it makes it sound like crap. I have a system, I've refined it, and I've simplified it for a very long time, and that allows me to get consistent results all the time. I don't have to spend a day working on a whip to get it playable when a homie's like, hey, do you have a track? Oh, I actually just worked on this earlier. Oh, give me a few days. No, I'm like, give me like 5 minutes. I'll export it now. It's already at the loudness. And secret tip for anyone, produce at your target LUFs. You can turn it down in your headphones, right? But like something can sound really good at -6 LUFs, and then you're like, all right, let me go master it. And then you've already have 100 layers in your track, just a time waste. So just once you get like 2 bars in, 4 bars in, get into the loudness. You're like, that's -2 LUFs, that's where I'm producing at. And then produce your whole track at that. And then boom, you've already got it 95% mastered. All you gotta do is just work on your mix. So that makes it so much easier. If I was starting out today, I would tell myself that tip because it saved me so much time. Simplify it and start with the loudness you want. If you're interested in making dubstep like this track, you can hit me up on Barnyard Recs and let me become your mentor today. I've mentored over hundreds of students in the industry and helped them create the tracks of their dreams, and I'd love to help you create yours.